it is the person might be lying. And so they're not comforted.
Is that across police forces,
Not all
male
police
or
forces.
female officer?
That's, it's still a huge, even, last year I was training detectives in Vancouver, and a police detective put up her hand and she says, I asked victims to tell me the story, the narrative, backwards. And I said, why? And she said, to see if they're lying. So they start, not all, but many start thinking they're lying to me.
It's a presumption of lying.
And if you try to question someone and you're assuming that they're lying, that demeanor is communicated in many ways, or you're testing the narrative. And so I think they have to start by being much more compassionate, and also by starting.
Never test the narrative and be more compassionate. So if it looks like the man is guilty, it is an easy job. Just say guilty and go to the lunch is the message here, if we are being quite honest. I know this is a highly offensive sarcasm, but think about it.
Consistent with the architecture of the memory, which is, what is it that you remember from your experience? Not tell me the story, because it usually isn't encoded as a cohesive, coherent narrative. So what is it that stood out for you? And so, one woman, there's a story from the States where she said, all I did was lay there and look at the ceiling tile and count the holes in the tile. And so
that's how she got through
That's
it.
how she got through it. The prosecutor got a picture of that ceiling tile. He had asked her how many holes. She said 36. There was 36 holes. That became an important piece of evidence. So what happens is they ask for the story. They don't ask what they were feeling. They don't start where the victim needs to start, and they start by questioning them in a suspicious way. And that activates, again, the person's brain to feel, I'm under threat, and then they can't recall the details.
And again, what is it about this crime as compared to, let's use your example of a home invasion?
Right.
Why a presumption of disbelief instead of belief in this case?
And these stereotypes have just lived on for so long that...
It could be stereotypes. This could be true, yes, I acknowledge that, it's interesting. It could also be that it's in a different type of crime, like I told you, that there's usually a lot more evidence, or it's more clear. Like, for example, if you steal a car, then the car is either there or not there, and if it's being driven, for example, in a city where there might be some cameras or whatever, you can see it moved, and you can see that some of the gas is missing, and all these kind of stuff it can be evidence in certain times and certain places. But again, the rape is very much different, because then it's usually word against word, and it's not easy to prove. And then maybe that might be one reason why there is a little bit more, let's say, bigger standard for evidence, maybe.
Women lie. Women just have sex that they regret. That this isn't really true. These statistics, it can't be really that prevalent. So there's a lot of rape myths that have lived on, and I think that lots of times, the way the system is set up, because women drop out, or they go to the police and it's unfounded because they haven't been interviewed in the way that's effective, or they say we don't have enough evidence. People think women are lying because of the unfounded. And oftentimes when they get to court, there's lots of inconsistencies in their statements. And that's again because they were asked the questions about those peripheral details, or they were interviewed too soon after the event. The rule is people shouldn't be interviewed after a traumatic event until they've had 2 nights sleep. So their brain has time to consolidate it, and the stress hormones have left their brain.
Let's follow up in the court since you've taken us there. Okay, we talked about how the police ought to do things differently. How about judges? How should judges handle cases of sexual assault and or rape when they come into their courtrooms?
Again, I think by making courtrooms that are more receptive. I was just in Prince George last week, and they have a whole team of therapy dogs that sit with victims in the courtroom.
It's in British Columbia.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
sometimes the feminist demands are quite reasonable and can be easily accommodated, and wherever these kind of problems with certain type of man hatred spreading can be fixed with a lot of therapy dogs, then the therapy dogs should be applied instantly, because those therapy dogs can really save some unfairly treated male victims of false rape accusations. So I think therapy dog is the best animal for far. It can really save your life in a certain situation. which is very unlikely, but long live the therapy dog.
Team of therapy dogs.
Or a team of them. You know what's even better than a therapy dog is a team of therapy dogs, because one dog can take notes when the other therapy dogs can really like look cute and you can cuddle with the dogs. So that's like even better, and you can play with the dogs all the time you want, and this must be really good because, like we concluded in a couple episodes ago, you don't really have autonomy, so please cuddle the dogs and it will help.
Victims in the courtroom.
It's in British Columbia.
Yeah. So the dogs are right there in the courtroom, sitting with the victim who's on the stand. So giving them ways to comfort them, but also judges need to be much more assertive in not allowing unethical defenses. And the law professor David Tanovich wrote a paper last year saying stop whacking victims, talking about the brutal ways that they are questioned and actually bullied on the stand.
So a judge would intervene more often?
And yeah, intervene more often. Don't allow these kinds of defenses to happen. And I think, you know, if everyone understands, if you actually put someone under threat and fear while they're trying to testify, they can't recall the details. They can't really tell the story. It's not really getting at the truth. I mean, I don't know why we think that's an effective method.
I can't have you in that chair and not ask you about the most high-profile case involving a judge and rape in this country in I don't know how many years. It happened, of course, in the province of Alberta. I understand you've done some consulting on that case, or you're peripherally involved with it somehow. So we're talking, of course, about Robin Camp, the judge who asked the witness, the woman who had been raped, on the stand, why didn't you just keep your knees closed?
Right.
Can you tell us what you learned from that experience?
I can't talk about that experience because I was a witness in those proceedings, and it's still a case that hasn't been come to terms yet.
Yes.
It's not being resolved. But in terms of my other work in the criminal justice system and with judges, what I've learned is, first of all, a lot of judges, and again, not all judges. I never want this to sound like I'm saying all this, but all.
Not all judges, remember guys, not all judges are feminist judges, not all judges are in favor of therapy dogs.
Police or judges or crowns, but a lot of judges are promoted to the level of judge and they've never even sat in a trial. They haven't practiced criminal law. They've never really learned any in-depth information around sexual assault. And the paradigm shift that I'm suggesting is a pretty significant shift. And I think it needs much more in-depth training and understanding to respond differently to victims.
How do you get to be a judge if you've never been to a trial?
And there are judges, if you go to the Ministry of Justice website and look at the profiles of judges who've been promoted, you could be an entertainment lawyer, you could do civil litigation, you could do corporate law, and then
Never
you
have
become
to
a
fight a
judge
trial.
and you've never been in a trial, and suddenly you're a judge sitting in a courtroom. So I think it's how do we promote our judges and how do we make sure that they have the kind of in-depth knowledge of sexual assault and understand the psychological repercussions as well as the gender issues. I mean, there was a case, again, in Alberta. It wasn't Justice Camp. Another judge
She hastens to add, okay?
who didn't believe a young woman who actually had threw a water bottle in the hallway at someone who's being intrusive with her, but she had laughed. And he said the laugh was inconsistent with someone who didn't want this event.
And I think this is horrible, and I think the case with the judge is really horrible. And there are, of course, like in any system, also in the system of law, faults. And these cases really seem that the justice has failed for this woman and that they have been unfairly treated. But we would really need to know how often this happens to kind of see how much the system needs to change or how we can prevent this from happening. These are individual cases, and I just don't think that, I don't want to sound horrible, but that they are not enough to throw away the innocent until proven guilty, even if there are 10 those outlying cases that some of the rapists get free without that they get convicted, because it really is either or. Either we have a system that has a lot of guilty people going free, well, not a lot of, but some guilty people going free at least, certainly, sorry, or we have a system that puts behind jail people that are not guilty. So there's not actual balance that is 100% in the middle, like there should be, that it would be fair, like it would be optimal utopian system, because we are human. We make mistakes, we are not paying attention, there's all these murky situations, and they are horrible, but we really need to look where we draw the line, that what is fair. That are we looking at that the victim or the perpetrator should have more power? Like, should they be treated equally, or should the victim be lifted that believe everything victim says but don't believe anything that perp says unless it's more condemning for him, or something like this? Or should we lift women, or should we lift men, or who should have longer jail sentences and more easier time to get convicted of a same type of crime, for example, with the same kind of details? And we have to draw the line somewhere, and if you have an ideological bias in one way, it will affect how you see the world, how you think about it, and you will draw the line somewhere that is not even possibly near the center line. It is just somewhere that helps your cause, that helps the people you are most interested in serving in the justice system, if you are this kind of professional, if you are a feminist judge who hates men. But let's continue.
This kind of sexual tension. You know, there's just something in the New York Times yesterday about laughter is one way of trying to disarm someone who's making you uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these normal ways that women are socialized to try to accommodate, deflect, disarm someone who's making them uncomfortable are used against them.
Can I understand this?
I don't think any type of like laughter or some nervous response or whatever should be used against anyone's evidence. But you have to also look at the other side of the coin. I wanna bring this to a balanced discussion. I wanna also show you the kind of dangers in that kind of rhetoric. That what about the perpetrator or the assumed perpetrator? If he goes there with the water bottle all ready for action, I don't believe I'm doing this. So, but only gets laughter, or perhaps even, yes, let's have sex, but then 20 minutes in, she froze up and didn't want to continue, but actually said nothing, did nothing, and now the guy is a rapist, even though they started and even he got affirmative consent to the sex, but maybe not affirmative, maybe he didn't keep on asking about the consent. So you see how muddy and deep issue this is. This is very hard and very balanced, and I've actually read months and months about law cases and actual law studies and law to just be able to represent this as a layman to you in any kind of rational setting, because this is so convoluted and you need to really know the law, and I of course can't say that I know the law, but I hope I don't make many mistakes, and please correct me if I'm making some law mistakes or I don't understand some concept discussed here, because they go so deep. But I think this is very, very interesting for your self-defense if you ever get accused of being the rapist, to know these things, to know how these things are treated, how this evidence is compiled, how it affects you, how it can free you, how it can make you look like guilty even if you didn't do it and stuff. You should really look into this, because this can one day save your life or someone close to you, like your father or brother or something. So this is interesting.
This better though? You could be an entertainment lawyer for 25 years representing clients in show business, and then find yourself presiding over a rape trial, and you've had no training in the courtroom dynamics of that situation?
You're supposed to read a bench book and get information, but that's very different. I mean, I have crowns that I've worked with who've been in the field for 17, 20 years. They say this is the most complex work, and they learn all the time because it takes even the effects that I'm describing are really hard to understand in terms of the person's personal psychology, if they had a childhood of dissociation, the neurobiology. There's all these things that are shaping the responses, and what's good evidence, and how do you get access to that good evidence, and how do we treat people?
I want to, in our remaining moments here, I want to come at it from the other side,
Okay.
which is,
But remember, whatever she said, basically she's a woman, so if we look at this here, she has no autonomy, so we should disregard any evidence she has bring forth for her case, right? Right? I mean, am I doing this feminism thing right?
I don't have to tell you, one of the cornerstones of our criminal justice system is the presumption of innocence, and yet you have suggested that one of the things police and judges need to do is start by believing the victim.
Yes.
And that is, I don't have to tell you, 180 degrees from what our justice system is supposed to be about, which is presume the so-called perpetrator is innocent.
Right.
How do we get around that?
So even though you're assuming he's innocent, that means doesn't mean then she's guilty or she's lying.
Yeah, so, but you don't have to tell me that it can affect how he's been judged. So if you assume his perpetrator has done it, then maybe you look for that kind of evidence, or you need more convincing that he didn't do it than if you think about that he's guilty. I mean, not guilty. So it can be whatever, but I think it's better to start with the assumption of not guilty in every type of crime. We can't take any certain type of crime to be in different case and should be applied differently, because it's very slippery slope, because these are the identity politics issues. These are the issues that feminists care about, and you can't let them have this, because it might affect the justice system in a way that it's unfair to men. Some say, and I tend to agree, that it's already unfair to men, the justice system. But if we lose these battles, if we, maybe she has a point, maybe we should go with this feminist theory, then goodbye innocent until proven guilty, if you are men, at least. Other way around, who cares? Who cares, basically? Who cares who is guilty or who is not, if on the other side we can just convict more men? Because that would be sweet.
So one doesn't mean the other. And that's what we've been doing. He's innocent, she must be, let's really look at her credibility, the way she's telling the story. Yes, get evidence, get the information, but also look at different types of evidence.
Different types of evidence, $100 I wanna bet that different types of evidence, women feels before reals, feelings over fact or evidence. But let's see, I don't remember this part.
Someone is dissociative, and there's a case I'm reading right now where a woman has a sensory fragment. She said,
Sorry, what's that?
Well, a sensory fragment, people remember it like, I can't get that smell, the smell of the alcohol on his breath.
Okay.
That's their starting point. Or that moment when I felt him squeeze my throat, or when he pushed me down on the bed. So that's what's predominant in their brain. And so they'll say, that's all I'm remembering right now. And people say, well, but if you start with that and you help them fill up the pieces, then they slowly recall really important pieces, like the one with the ceiling tile. Going back, well, there's some corroborative evidence. But I think it doesn't mean go and not get the evidence. It just means the attitude you have with the person, you're not assuming they're lying.
Because I know you're not a big Twitter person, but there is a hashtag on Twitter right now, #BelieveHer. And I guess some people are going to want to know whether or not believing her, first and foremost, means we're doing away with the presumption of innocence. You think?
No, because we believe he's innocent, we're believing she's innocent. We're believing her. We're believing something has happened.
Okay, but both can't be true, right?
Well, then the evidence will tell the story. That's why we...
What? We believe she's innocent and we believe he is innocent. What? I didn't understand that the victim was actually accused of anything. But I do think the evidence needed and the interviews need to be done fairly and not with the assumption that he did it. So that's just very confusing rhetoric, I think. Very confusing.
Investigate. That's where we get the information.
We are going to have a discussion right after you and I are
Yes.
done here with a larger group of guests who say that because of the nature of the crime of sexual assault and the prevalence of it in our society, which I think we're learning a lot more about thanks to
Right.
the grossness of the American election campaign right now and
exactly.
some of the information
Yeah.
that is coming to the fore, that maybe we should have a separate court system that deals with victims of sexual violence as opposed to other kinds of violence.
So let's have a feminist kangaroo court instead of a real court, because we might want to have a fair court, because we don't want a biased court for people. For example, if a woman is accused of stealing a car or whatever, we don't want a unfair court. So let's make another. Let's call it, let's say, a kangaroo court, maybe even a feminist kangaroo court that is more interested in judging males and having really tough punishments, but the evidence can be flexible or minimal at best. Just a different type of law. The type of law is applied there in the feminist kangaroo court, which assumes that the woman is a victim and the man is a violent pig, because we have all these great statistics that present the case that women are violent pigs. So let's form a feminist kangaroo court to judge men, and some ideas about this kangaroo court coming next. In the next episode, but let's just finish this up quickly.
What do you think of that notion?
I know the domestic violence court.
She's licking her lips. Look at here. Just sounds so fucking delicious. So sweet justice served cold.
A separate court system that deals with victims of sexual violence as opposed to other kinds of violence.
Let's see.
What do you think of that notion?
Kyllä, yes, it tastes good to have a feminist kangaroo court to judge men.
I know the domestic violence courts have been profoundly effective. So I think the idea of having people who have this expertise, have specialized knowledge.
Specialized feminist knowledge of trauma theory, I tell you.
Have all kinds of courtrooms that are set up to...
All kind of kangaroo court set up to make you look criminal.
meet the requirements of making a person feel safer and
So a lot of therapy dogs coming.
more welcomed, and just the trust that this courtroom is people who understand these dynamics. I think it probably could go a long way. We won't have some of the mistakes we're seeing, judicial mistakes we're seeing now of judges, because I don't think anyone does this work with any intention of harming people. I think the idea of...
So maybe she's been accused before of trying to harm men, and now she, like, where did this harming people come from? Certainly you are not talking about harming women, because they are treated so unfairly in the system or something.
of not understanding certain pieces of people's behavior, or not understanding the kind of evidence, or not understanding the demeanor of someone who's been traumatized, has led to profound errors. And I think women don't go forward anymore. We know very few women report these crimes. We know fewer women...
Why would you, given what you know what's waiting for you?
Exactly. Unfounded levels are high even at the point when they do go to the police, and then there's very few convictions. So I did focus groups last year at U of T, I think almost 40 of them with students, and around sexual assault. I'd say maybe one or two said they would even go to the police.
One
So
or two women said,
out of
if it happened to me,
yes,
I wouldn't
that's
do
it. Out of, So there, that's
If it would happen to me, there is so much wrong with that. We are having people grow up, our children, being taught that they should view the world and look at how patriarchal this world is and how women are oppressed anywhere and everywhere. We'll come back to this, but the number she's referring to is the unknown number or the dark number. How many rape cases don't get reported to the system, and if they are not reported to the system, we don't know. You don't need to go around and ask your ideological buddies, are men evil and women good, and then make a study that what would they do if they get raped. Because that certainly is ethical evidence of how much of the rapes get reported or not. But because the thing is that that number cannot be known. You don't know how many cases are unreported because they are unreported. You don't know. Oh, this is so annoying. But that is one, for example, that number is one that they always bring up to justify all these craziness and Orwellian law.
It's discouraging. I mean, not that we want massively, incarcerated offenders, but if a woman does want safety and she's feeling that this person is dangerous.
And she feels there's no justice on the other end for her.
Exactly, right? And how do we have a deterrent? How do we have women think, I want to be able to carry on in this world and not have to be under threat all the time?
We are going to carry on the conversation with our next group of guests, but I want to thank you, Dr. Lori Haskell,
Yes.
clinical psychologist, U of T, for getting us started. Thanks so much.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Help TVO create a better.
Thank you, and let's go to the next. This is basically the main event starting now, so this will be fun.